Good morning and welcome to this workshop session entitled Planning 101. My name is Daniel Kilpinen. I work with the Orange County Neighborhood Preservation and Revitalization Office. I thank you for being here this morning. This session will talk about change that happens all around you, and it will explain the planning process so that you will learn how to track nearby development, how it could impact your community, and how you can voice your concern or approval early enough to influence development decisions. Nicolas Thalmueller, AICP, is a planner who has worked with the Orange County Planning Division since 2014 with roles in the Development Review Committee Office, Comprehensive Planning, Current Planning, and Intergovernmental Coordination sections. He earned a Bachelor in Public Administration as well as a Master of Science degree in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Central Florida. Nicolas has worked extensively with property owners, developers, community organizations to review and process a variety of development projects, plan amendments, land use policies, rezoning requests, and legal agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nick Thalmueller.
Thanks, Dan. That was a very nice introduction. Again, my name is Nick Thalmueller, planner with the Orange County Planning Division. So my topic today is Planning 101. And it's a difficult topic because really there is no Planning 101. Planning is a hugely expansive and complex topic. I could stand up here for 6, 7, 8 hours, talk to you guys, and barely touch the surface. So what I'm going to go over today is, in the interest of time, I'm going to try and fly through some basic concepts, talk about the organization of the Orange County Planning Division and what we do there, and then talk about how the community can get involved, stay up to date with things that are going on in the area. Basic outline of what we're looking at today. So the first question is, what is planning? I ask myself this question every day, and I've yet to get a straight answer. And honestly, there is no solid definition exactly of what is planning. But at its most basic, planning is the process of regulating land use and developing standards and strategies to guide the design of the built environment, as well as to protect civic, cultural, and environmental assets. So each county and city has its own planning division, and they're all set up a little differently. This is the basic organization of the Orange County Planning Division. We have 5, really 6 work sections that focus on different things: comprehensive planning, current planning, development review, research, intergovernmental coordination, and urban design. So this begs the question, why do we plan? We plan because growth is coming. And this is a slide we like to show a lot. This really drives home the point that the population of Orange County has exploded over the past few decades and is continued to explode as we go into the future. So the goal is to guide that growth and development in order to try and protect and create more prosperous, healthy, safe, livable communities for everyone. This slide really just kind of drives home the point of the amount of population explosion we're expecting. By 2040, 600,000 more people in the county, which is double the current populations of the city of Orlando and Apopka, which are highlighted here. So one thing we do is we like to look at where the growth is occurring so we can focus kind of special efforts. This is a heat map. It's a couple of years old now, but it shows areas in red there are where the most development has been occurring, the most building permits have been coming in. So we have a number of tools to try and focus and regulate that growth. First of all, there is the comprehensive plan. This is going to be the ultimate authority. This is the vision document to guide growth and development within the county. Within the comprehensive plan, there's a couple thousand goals, objectives, and policies split up between 19 chapters or elements. These include future land use, transportation, housing, open space, recreation. And these are going to be where we find the strategies that show where we want to direct and what type of growth that we want and development that we want. There are policies that focus on the protection of the natural environment, such as wetland areas, Special environmental protection areas like the Wekiva Study Area and the Econ Protection Area have their own special environmental policies attached to them. There are also conservation lands and policies to protect the existing character of the rural area, because that's important as well, such as existing agricultural lands, just general rural properties shown here, and rural settlements, which are areas that are designated, shown here, designated in the comp plan. They have their own special protections to kind of protect the existing historic and rural character of these areas. And then, of course, there are urban and suburban development strategies. One of the big tools we have, one of the growth management tools, is the urban service area, which is going to be this red line. Everything inside of that red line is what we call the urban service area. This is where the county concentrates urban services and type of development. Everything outside that urban service area, unless it's in a special planning area, which I'll go over in a little bit, it's considered the rural service area, and it's generally large blot, 1 unit per 10 acre developments, agricultural type uses. Again, I didn't create this presentation, but apparently this map shows you what the municipalities look like. It's important to understand that the unincorporated county's jurisdiction is everything that's not in a city, which is shown here. All right, so we also have a number of joint planning area agreements with surrounding jurisdictions. Those are shown here in this map here. These are agreements that each one's a little different with the city, between the city and the county. Sometimes they talk about what type of development's allowed there. Sometimes there's a special landscaping standards, signage standards, certain land use map. A lot of times it's just deals with annexations or service agreements. There are also growth centers, which are highlighted here, which function like kind of mini urban service areas. Those allow urban type development outside the urban service area, but we have agreements with outside jurisdictions so they get their services from them instead of the county. Then there are special planning areas. Horizon West and Innovation Way have their own special strategies, goals, policies, and development standards. So they're also their own kind of thing. So now the future land use map. This is the main document contained in the comprehensive plan. Each property within the county has a future land use designation. Future land use is basically a vision of what type of development is to occur in the property. It's separated out in here, commercial, it allows a type of development and a certain level of that development. So commercial allows commercial uses at so many square feet. Office, so much office. Low density residential, which you see in the yellow, residential uses up to 4 units an acre, so on and so on. So then there's the Code of Ordinances. This is going to be where you're going to find more specific development standards and subdivision regulations that have been enabled by the comprehensive plan. And where you're going to find information on zoning. So the zoning map, which is shown here, on top of future land use, every property also has a zoning designation. And the zoning is going to be a little more specific. Zoning is going to say specifically what types of uses are or are not allowed in the property. It's also going to have specific site development standards, which you can see here. This is from the Orange County Code. So you can see we have the specific zoning districts, and they have things like minimum lot area, setbacks, etc. So each property has to have consistent future land use and zoning in order to be able to develop. I can speak. So commercial has to have one of the commercial districts, and there are a number of, there's retail commercial, general commercial. If someone wants to do something that's different than what's allowed under that zoning or future land use designation, they have to submit an application to the Orange County Planning Division to either rezone their property to something that's consistent with the future land use map, or apply for what's called a comprehensive plan future land use map amendment. When they submit those applications, county staff is going to take in the application, we're going to do a review, and then it's going to go through a process that I'll describe in a little bit. And through that process, there's going to be multiple opportunities for the community to get involved, provide their input. The two most important things we're looking at when someone wants to change their zoning or their future land use is going to be compatibility with the surrounding area, the surrounding development trends in the area, the existing community, and consistency with those goals, objectives, policies listed in the comprehensive plan. So, yes?
Hi. Can you explain how the areas where there's residential and then there's commercial?
So the same property that has maybe a residential land use and commercial zoning. So the zoning maps existed since the 50s, and there are a number of properties that have had commercial zoning forever. In 1990, when the Orange County Comprehensive Plan was adopted, the future land use map was laid on top, and it's not perfect. There are a number of inconsistencies where maybe a property has had a commercial use and it's been commercial since the 50s or 60s, but it got a residential future land use designation. So what the policies say is that if that commercial use, that historic commercial use, stays in operation, they keep paying their business tax license and keep up, that use can stay. But if they have a lapse in their business tax license and they go away and they want to come back, they can't. They're not automatically grandfathered in. They would have to change their zoning to be consistent with the land use, or they would have to change their land use to be consistent with the zoning. And at that point, that's where they're going to submit the application, and we're going to do the review and say, what's really appropriate here? Maybe, this commercial use was appropriate the way the neighborhood was organized 20, 30 years ago, but now it's gone away and they want to come back, and now it's a single family area, and it's not going to be appropriate to have that commercial use there anymore. So infrastructure planning is a whole other conversation on itself. That'll be a discussion for another day. Basically, concurrencies just requires that public facilities and services be in place to offset the impacts of growth and development, level service, basically level service of those facilities, and then there's a whole financial feasibility assessment that goes in. So, the fun part, review and public participation. So, planning is a public process. And this is an example of just a flow chart of one of the processes. This is a conventional rezoning. I know it looks complicated. That's actually the most simple of the processes we have. It only gets more fun from there. But these circles here highlight a number of the spots that involve public participation. When an application comes in, we're going to send out notice to community members to certain properties around the subject property, and we're going to let them know that a public hearing's been scheduled and what the request is. So we have a number of ways to do that. There is the county calendar page. Hopefully most of you are familiar with that. You can go on and see what has been scheduled for the agenda for the Board of County Commissioner, Planning and Zoning Commission hearings. There are newspaper advertisements. Yes.
Where is that? You're saying that we're familiar with where?
Orange County calendar. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's the government calendar page. You can just Google Orange County calendar, and it's one of the first things that pops up. Or I can give you guys a link later. I don't have that particularly with me. But this is basically what it looks like. It's got the public hearings that are coming up. You can click on them. A couple weeks prior to the public hearings, there's going to be the agenda for what's heard there. There's going to be backup materials, including staff reports and such for each of the cases that are going to be heard. So there's also newspaper advertisements. Prior to each public hearing, we place an advertisement in the newspaper. It looks something like this. It's a brief description of where the request is, the request has gone to and from, just to let people know the public hearing's happening. These are those public hearing notices that we send out. So we send these out to property owners within a certain radius around the subject property. It's unfortunately impossible to get everyone who may be interested, but we do our best. If we're sending out to a neighborhood and the radius cuts off half the neighborhood, we're going to go on and extend it to make sure everyone gets notified. We also notify community organizations, homeowners associations within a mile of each request. But again, we can't get everyone, so we take a couple additional steps. One of them is whenever there's a rezoning or land use amendment, the property is required to post this public hearing notice poster on the property at least 2 weeks. Sometimes they're a little tough to see. We do our best to make sure they're large enough and can be seen from the roadway. They're required to place it so it can be seen from the right-of-way, so people walking or driving by can say, oh, something's happening on that property, then go up and take a closer look. It's going to have basic information, and it's also going to have contact information for who you can call at the county for more. All right, so there's also community meeting notices. If every future land use map amendment that comes in, and most controversial rezonings and development review applications are going to get a community meeting. These are done at the commissioner's request, so it's up to them whether they want a community meeting or not. Generally, every future land use map amendment is going to get a community meeting. What we're going to do is we're going to send that notice out to, again, the same radius surrounding property owners around the property, homeowners associations, community organizations within a mile, and we're going to pick the nearest school, community center, something like that, and have a community meeting. That's really the best part, best opportunity for the community to have their voices heard. We encourage everyone to come out. We'll explain what the request is. Staff from county will be there. The applicant will be there to explain what they're requesting for the property, and we'll be able to gather public input and comment, which will then be compiled into the staff report that's presented to the commission when it goes for decision. There's also Orange County Fast Track. You can just, again, Google Orange County Fast Track. This has most of the backup material for development review cases. If you have a case number, parcel ID, sometimes applicant name, you could type it in here and see what the most recent application is, where it is in the process, what type of staff comments have been generated. And then my personal favorite, Cfl Atlas. I think this is the best way for the community to really identify and see what's going on in their area. Like I mentioned, we can't send notices out to everyone. It's just not physically possible. But Cfl Atlas, you can Google Cfl-Atlas and go to the webpage, or you can download the free app to your iPhone or Android device. And what you're going to see pop up is a little thing like this, outline of the county, and it's going to have pins in it. You can zoom into your neighborhood and click. Each one of those pins is going to be a rezoning application, land use application, environmental permit, roadway improvement, things like that. And when you click on it, it's going to pop a little screen, and it's going to tell you the basics of what the request is, who the applicant is, when the public hearings are for it, where and when the community meetings are for it. And it's going to have information on the case planner, so you can give them a call if you want a little more information. I highly encourage everyone to go to ocfl.net/atlas or download the app to your phone. It's really, really a great opportunity. So, as I mentioned, public hearings. Each application request that comes in is going to get a public hearing. This is going to be the next greatest opportunity for the community to come out. We encourage all concerned property owners to come out to the public hearings and express their concerns, questions, whatever they may have to say about the request that's being heard in that day. So the Planning and Zoning Commission does what their name says. They consider planning and zoning related issues. This is a recommending board. So what's going to happen is when a rezoning or land use amendment application comes in, development application, staff's going to do a technical review, take a look at the policies, surrounding areas, hold a community meeting. They're going to write all that up in a staff report and make a recommendation. It's then going to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission. They also function as the local planning agency. They're going to hear the case and they're going to make a recommendation. That recommendation is then going to go to the Board of County Commissioners for final approval. So there's also the Board of Zoning Adjustment. This is a little different. They are going to hear appeals of administrative decisions. They're going to consider variance requests. So if someone comes in and they can't quite meet the setback for their zoning district due to some special circumstance, they can request a variance. That request is going to go before the BZA, and they're going to decide whether or not it's appropriate to let them have 15 feet instead of 20 feet from the road. There are also, as I mentioned, each zoning district has a specific list of permitted uses. Sometimes there are special exceptions for uses that are in those areas. In order to, you can't just come in and submit a building permit to develop that use. You have to apply for a special exception, and it has to be reviewed to see if that particular use is appropriate for that area. So then we have the ultimate authority, the Board of County Commissioners. Among the variety of tasks that they do here, they're going to be the final decision makers on whether or not to approve these things. When it comes to zoning requests, development approvals, special project, anything, the Board of County Commissioners, and there's 6 county commissioners plus the mayor. And again, they are going to be the ultimate authority on all of these decisions. Here's a basic map, in case anyone's interested, of what the commission districts look like. And this is basically what one of those BCC public hearings looks like in the chambers at the Orange County Administrative Building, downtown Orlando, is where all these hearings are going to be heard. So the Planning Division also, we don't just react to what the development community is doing. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, often, we engage in some special major projects, such as developing specific standards and strategies for special overlay districts. For example, we have one for the iDrive district that was completed recently. We just completed a small area study and development standards for rural enclaves, which are rural areas within the urban service area that we've created standards to kind of protect their rural character. We're currently looking at one for the Pine Castle district. And then the county is in the very early stages of beginning to revise and kind of reorganize the way the comprehensive plan works. So right now, all the policies, goals, and objectives, so some are targeted to certain areas, but generally everything is blanket policy across the county. We're starting to look at developing certain strategies for specific market areas. And also the county, again, is in the very early stages of beginning to reorganize and rework the Code of Ordinances, the Orange County Code, to focus a little more of the form of the built environment. Again, these are in the very early stages. Once these projects really get underway, there's going to be extensive community outreach, community meetings, workshops, public hearings for the community to get involved and really provide their input, comment, and help guide the process. So keep your eyes out for those type of things. So that was my very fast and presentation. Any questions, answers, anything people want more information on? Nope. Yes, Dan's got a mic.
Thanks. I know you mentioned different requests for property and community meetings coming out of them. To what extent, what size property development warrants the community meetings and all those other things? Like, is it just a Walmart-sized project, or are you talking about a community? How big does it have to be?
So anytime someone comes in to change their future land use, that future land use map, there's automatically going to be a community meeting, and we do 2 cycles of those per year. There's small-scale amendments that are under 10 acres and large-scale amendments that are over 10 acres. Any property has the ability to request to change that future land use. But it is in the comprehensive plan. It is, the large scales are about a year-long process. Small scales are 6 to 8 months. It's a very involved, in-depth process where we look at a number of things. So a community meeting is going to be key and required for any time one of those requests come in, because compatibility, as I mentioned, is the #1 consideration we're looking at if someone wants to change what's there already. Rezonings are done on a case-by-case basis, simply because we get a lot of simple rezonings where there may be an issue with they have an inconsistent future land use or zoning, but it is in an established residential area. It just happens to have a commercial zoning district. Something minor like that, we're not going to have a community meeting. But if it's something where we know the community is going to be concerned, where there may be any issues that pop up, we're going to hold a community meeting for that. And then even if we don't think initially that a community meeting is required, if we start to hear from the community, if those notices go out, if they see on Cfl Atlas that something's happening, and we start getting 3, 4, 5 emails, calls, a community meeting is going to be required for that, because we know the community has interest and concerns about what's going on.
Yeah, this gets back to the question the lady asked earlier. When a new development or something's going in, do y'all take a look at what the traffic impact's going to be? I mean, you kind of said that's another department, and I'm concerned about, well, gee, they're going to go put this apartment complex in there, and I live out by UCF, and you know how bad the traffic is there.
Yeah.
I mean, do y'all take into consideration the additional impact of traffic on either the side streets or even the main street when you start putting in these new developments, or do you say, well, that's another department, we don't do traffic or roads or anything like that?
So I didn't mean that. I meant transportation planning, long-range traffic improvements is handled by a different department. But when an application comes in, we do require a traffic impact study. An applicant's going to be required to conduct, doing a certain methodology, an impact study to see what level of service the surrounding roads are operating at, what the increase in traffic from this development is going to be, and they're going to require to submit that as part of the application. Our Transportation Engineering Division is going to look at it, and we're going to write that up in the technical staff report. We cannot deny something solely based on traffic. We're just not allowed. What we can do is identify what that traffic impact is going to be, what the safety implications are going to be in the staff report when we do our in-depth assessment, and bring that to the Board of County Commissioners, and they're going to make the ultimate vote. And then again, if there are going to be significant impacts, they're going to be required to enter into an agreement and pay their proportionate share of what the impact is going to be. And then that money can be used for future roadway improvements or school improvements, et cetera. Yeah.
The last slide, you were talking about the project or the effort that was getting underway. Do you have a time frame for that and how it will affect different communities? Like, will it provide resources or?
I do not have timeframes for that. Again, the county's in very early discussions to trying to figure out how it's going to be organized, what type of approach they're going to take. But once those do get hammered out, there will be, I can tell you, extensive community outreach. There will be a number of community meetings, presentations, discussions, workshops, to let everyone know what those changes will be, how it will affect your area, and how you can get involved and make your voice heard, because that's the most important thing.
Are there any other questions for Nick regarding planning 101?
The only thing, just to close out, I can tell you is that if you do receive that community meeting notice, if you do hear of a development going on in your neighborhood, please give us a call, send us an email, talk to your commissioner. Really, we want to know, how is this going to affect the existing community? And as I've said a couple times now, compatibility is going to be the #1 concern we're looking at. Sorry,
Hi, Nick.
One here, and then we'll get after it.
Quick question for you. Follow-on question to the impacts on roadways and things. What about infrastructure services, things like firehouse and, policing and enforcement, things like that? Is that being considered as part of the planning, or is that different group? Do you guys tie into that? At a certain point, I got to believe that, areas are going to grow beyond whatever a particular firehouse may be able to provide in terms of the density in that area. And is that something that's considered as part of that long-range plan or the OC Atlas, or those things we can see on there as part of that, the growth in the area? Or
So absolutely. We are going to do an assessment anytime something comes in to see, where the nearest fire stations are, what the sheriff patrol area is, what the response times are, and that's all going to factor into whether or not to recommend approval for the application. So it is something we look at, and we do coordinate with all the other divisions. So it's an ongoing process.
In particular to the Pine Castle meeting that is coming up, it was canceled recently. Has that been rescheduled?
You're referring to the public hearing?
Yes.
Yes. So that effort has been postponed to work out a number of issues. The last I heard, they were looking at August or September for the next public hearing. I don't believe they've settled on a date, but when they do, they will be sending out a new notice to all the property owners that received the original notice,
Okay.
and letting them know when that new date's going to be. Right now, I'm fairly certain they don't have a new public hearing date.
Okay, and so what is the general process, and how long does it generally take once we have the public hearings and it goes before the board, before it's decided? Is there a general time frame?
Well, it all depends on the complexity of the request. Pine Castle was a county-initiated request that was actually started maybe 2 years ago at this point. What we do is we start out doing a small area study. We do an assessment of the area, development of the area, conduct community meetings to see what the community wants to see. This particular one was commissioner-driven. The commissioner had heard a lot of complaints, concerns from the community, so he asked the planning division to take a look, see what we can do to improve development in the area. Drew up a number of standards. It went through public hearings the transmittal public hearing several months ago. That report was sent up to the state for review. The state takes a look just to make sure we've crossed all our T's and dotted all our I's for the paperwork, sends it back to us, and then it comes back for adoption public hearings. Again, it has to go before the Planning and Zoning Commission to take a look at all the technical issues, make a recommendation. Then that goes to the Board of County Commissioners. Generally, early in the process, there were a number of dates set. Those are all tentative dates if everything went perfectly. However, if extra concerns come up in the process, things get extended. So there is no perfect time frame. It's all just until it's right.
What in particular has extended it this time?
I'm I'm not personally involved in this stage in the process. I believe there were some concerns about certain standards in some of the areas, some last-minute minor changes that have been made. So they weren't 100% ready to go for the adoption hearings. And again, like I said, they're going to wait until everything is right. Otherwise, it gets adopted, and then we have to go back and start the process over if you want to change something. But I think there were some design standards in a couple of the proposed districts that just weren't quite ready.
Thank you.
Oh, we'll make it over.
This is just one comment on the gentleman that had a question about the services. I know Orange County does do this because they just opened a brand new fire station on University Boulevard just to address the needs of the growth that's in that area, because before that, it had overgrown the capacity of the fire station they did have out in that area. So y'all doing a good job at least addressing the needs of the services like that.
Oh, thank you.
So this may apply to, what's the relationship between the Orange County planning and zoning and that of the municipalities? It's like Winter Park, Orlando, all these have their own separate, which could have impacts on one another. So how are those worked out?
So we talk with the municipalities within the county. We let them know when we have developments going on that are adjacent to their areas. I talked a little earlier about the joint planning area agreements we have with a number of them. We don't have them with all counties. For instance, we used to have one with the city of Orlando. We no longer have that. But a lot of things like the Maitland joint planning area has a specific map that shows, what type and what level of development can go in these areas. There's one with Mount Dora, which actually isn't in the county, but we still have a joint planning area agreement with them that has certain site standards of what can go on. A lot of them deal with utility service, where they're going to get their service from, how annexation is going to work. So we do talk with all, and then we have ongoing conversations with the cities to see what's going on in their areas, adjacent to our areas.
Orlando's gonna make its decisions independent of Orange County, and Orange County,
Yep.
Orlando, right?
Yes, they're
So
their
what-
own independent jurisdictions.
Right. So people ask me about the impact of this or that. Orlando could do something that would have an impact on Orange County. Orange County do something that have an impact on Orlando, and you may not be able to control that, right?
That's accurate, yeah. The Orange County commissioners cannot control what Orlando does. All we could do is talk with them and have an ongoing dialogue to try and coordinate development efforts. For instance, there is a special overlay area on Narcoossee along Lake Whippoorwill in that area, where the county adopted certain standards for development of the area, and the city also adopted similar standards for if those properties were annexed into the city, the same type of development would be going on.
I believe the slide after you're showing the cities and the municipalities, I think you showed a map that said there were some areas that had services, but they weren't necessarily, they were in an unincorporated Orange County.
The growth centers.
Growth centers. Okay, I thought you were saying that some unincorporated areas like had services even though they weren't in the city. That
Yes,
might be
yep.
unique. So
Yeah, so there's certain areas of the county where, again, we concentrate our services within that urban service area. But there are areas outside that are in the county that do get like water and wastewater services, is what I'm referring to, from the cities. Sometimes there are interlocal agreements where the city's fire or the county's fire or sheriff services will serve areas within the city, but we have legal agreements for areas like that.
implementing something for themselves is utilizing the close by city.
Yes, yep. And those are all through legal agreements with the cities, yeah.
Any other questions for our speaker today? Here we go.
Yes, sir.
This way.
Nope. We got it.
The septic tank, the Wekiva area, which cuts through Pine Hills, and I think that the county service area stops at Hiawassee, but
Around
Pine
there.
Hills goes on to Apopka Island, so it's going to be all part of the same septic tank and sewer issue. Has the planning changed, or as you look at that?
In particular to the Wekiva area? So there are certain specific standards, environmental standards to what can go on within the Wekiva area. For instance, there's extensive open space requirements against septic tank issues. I'm not 100% familiar with a lot of the environmental standards, although we do coordinate the comprehensive plan. A lot of those are written by the Environmental Protection Division, which is, again, another division within the county that we coordinate with. But they're going to be the experts on those environmental standards.
Would they be expanding the sewerage because of that?
In certain cases, again, it's a case-by-case basis. Where there are lines and where it's financially feasible to do so, we are going to be extending lines. There are certain cases where we can extend utility service outside of the urban service area when it comes to particular cases of contamination or special cases. There are policies written into the comprehensive plan about that. But for the most part, we're going to concentrate county services in there. And if there's a city that has lines somewhere in the area, we're going to coordinate with them to try and see how those properties can be served appropriately, as opposed to having to be on septic.
Do you guys know what was the last municipality to become like a city officially?
That's an excellent
Has that been
question.
recent, or
Huh?
has it been a while?
That is a good question. I'm not 100% certain. It's
Okay.
been a while. I know there's an effort out on the east side right now trying to look at seeing ways they could possibly try and incorporate, but I don't know how that effort's going.
Okay, that's something that comes up as a rumor in our area a lot as, will that ever happen?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, careful what you wish for, because I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing or not, but just curious, like, it doesn't happen very often, or what that process would be.
As far as creating
So
a
you can
new
look into
city, it does not happen very often. Generally, the most common thing is annexations of property from the county jurisdiction into city jurisdiction.
Yeah,
That happens fairly frequently.
adding to an existing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But it is certainly possible for an area to incorporate. I believe this is a statutory process that they have to go through. So.